when Steve Jobs was asked that what do his kids think of the iPad, he said, oh, they haven't used it yet. And this was, I think, a year after the iPad had been launched. And so, what do you mean they haven't used it? No, he said, we regulate their screen time at home. They are not allowed to use the iPad at home. There are other devices, they spend their screen time on that. Please guide regarding today's lifestyle in our youth, like youth's lifestyle. They wake up at noon and sleep at sunrise. Also glued to their mobile phones 24 hours a day. Cell phones are carried to the washroom and bath too. Are they taking shower with the cell phone? Probably not. But family lives totally affected and disturbed. It's a very real problem. But to think that only the youth of today are glued to their cell phones would be the greatest misconception. I think the adults are more glued to their cell phones. In fact, that's the only thing they're glued to these days. Nothing else is worth gluing to. According to them, everybody is on their devices 24/7. Now, I have spoken about it in the past as well, but please, you have to understand one thing. The mind of an individual, of a youth, of an adolescent, of somebody who's growing up, their brain is very different to somebody who's already grown up. If you are 70, 80, you will get up at 4 in the morning, and you will think everybody who doesn't get up at 4:30 is a bad boy or a bad girl. But until you are 24, 25, or at least 23, you need sleep in the morning. The melatonin production in the brain is very different. It's very hard for a young adult to fall asleep at 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. It's just the way the brain is evolving, and so on. So what becomes more important is what sort of samskara you are giving to the children. Because if they are already grown up, it's a little too late to give any samskara. Samskaras are given when they are growing up, between the ages of 3 to, let's say, 10. After that, it's a little too late. Certainly, once they are in the teenage, it'll be very difficult. So they will go a transformation in their teenage, and they will go another one when they're about 25. So personalities of individuals change at 2 points in their life, usually when they hit teenage, and then once again when they're about 25. Sometimes it's a little delayed, 27, 28, and so on. So we have to bear that in mind. And when it comes to giving samskara to children, there are, you as parents, you can't always be friends. That's a recipe for disaster. Somewhere you have to be a parent. Somewhere you have to put your foot down. And that almost always begins by implementing or inculcating a sense of self-discipline in their lives. This disciple asked his master once, he said, you always talk about self-discipline, Anushasan. Why is it so important in life? He said, well, have you seen Ma Ganga? Yes. Where does it start and where does it end? He said it starts from Gangotri and ends in Ganganagar. He said, have you seen the banks of the river? Yes, master. What if these banks were not there? Would the river make as far? It's a magnificent river. I don't even know if it should even be called a river. It's something divine. Reminds me of this thing when Akbar once asked that which is the most sacred animal in your dharma, he asked Birbal. And Birbal said, a donkey. A donkey, Akbar said. How can donkey? I thought it was a cow. He said, Jahapana, cow is not an animal. हम गाय को पशु नहीं मानते. So, Ma Ganga is more than a river. It's held the civilization of this country together for thousands of years. Its importance is beyond what we can state. So the master asked his disciple, would the river make it as far without these banks? No, he said, of course not. It would just be all over the place. And that's exactly the point. These banks provided a framework, a sense of discipline. Now, if the children are glued to their phones and devices, it's somewhere more a reflection on you as a parent than it is on them as children. Reminds me of this time when this very loving devotee, he said, Swamiji, kai baar hum yahan pe aate hain, when we come there, and people ask me, this was a few years ago, are you going to the same Om Swami who's in Big Boss? And he said, what should we say at that time? I said, listen, if somebody thinks you follow that Om Swami and you're going to him for spiritual wisdom, it's not at all a reflection on me, but it's a reflection on you. They think you could be going to that person. That's how you've evolved spiritually. So somewhere when this happens, it's a reflection on your parenting. You've gone a bit too lenient when you should have gone a little too firm. When Steve Jobs was asked that what do his kids think of the iPad, he said, oh, they haven't used it yet. And this was, I think, a year after the iPad had been launched. And so, what do you mean they haven't used it? No, he said, we regulate their screen time at home. They are not allowed to use the iPad at home. There are other devices, they spend their screen time on that. Plus, we also have to be mindful of the fact that today the primary source of information for everybody is the internet. So if they are spending time online, watching fun stuff, entertainment, they're also spending time online to attend their lectures, to gauge where the world is going, to get other information and everything else. We are very rapidly moving towards killing paper, and everything is happening online. So we also have to be a bit relaxed. And it's always best to have some non-negotiable rules in your household. That these 2 or 3 things are non-negotiable. When we were growing up, it was non-negotiable that you would brush your teeth before you go to bed. You would wash your hands and feet and so on. You would, clean your bed, and you would make your bed when you get up in the morning. Those were non-negotiable things. If a child had fallen asleep, my father would wake him up or her up. Have you brushed your teeth before you go to bed? No, go brush your teeth first. That kind of thing. It helps because freedom is not some unbridled way of life. An absence of freedom is not always stifling either. Freedom is responsible existence. Freedom is responsible coexistence. And each individual, each child, each person on this planet is absolutely unique. So somewhere we have to factor in that individuality, that uniqueness. And it's just sometimes about discovering what is the natural temperament of a child, and the dopamine kick we get when we're online from those short videos and things. It's undeniable. The world's going crazy over it. There was a time when people would watch, let's say, a 20-minute video on YouTube. Now, before they watch a video, they see the duration. 7 minutes, who's going to bother? Even that, if they do watch, they are going from one segment to the next to the next. They're just fast forwarding. So we are really running out of patience here. And that's not a good thing, but I think it's good to be in a Sakshi Bhav as a spectator and see where the world is going. Because I don't want to make the classic mistake that all people who are moving into old age make, and that is they think the new generation today has got no hope. The world is deteriorating, everything is going down. The fact of the matter is there's never been a better time to be alive. There is enough data to show that life has really progressed, circumstances have really improved, people are actually living much better lives than they ever lived before. So we have to acknowledge the fact that it's an ever-changing world, constantly moving about, and changes will occur, and some changes are good, some are not so good in the context of overall evolution and growth of this planet and human race and beyond. And when it comes to children, like I wrote in my book, the children of tomorrow, but since you're the children of today, I think I'll share this snippet with you again. This priest always gave amazing discourses to people. And in his church, he had this big thing plastered there. People came to him from far and wide to seek his guidance and counsel. He pasted this thing which said 10 commandments of parenting. Thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that, thou shalt not do this, thou shalt do that, blah, blah, blah. And then it so happened that he got married. He got married. People still came to him for his wisdom and for his advice and so on. He had his first child. And when he had his first child, after 5 months, he took off that poster and replaced it with another one, which said 10 principles of parenting, which said, try to do this. This is a good thing. Try to do that and see if this works. But these are broadly the principles. Some more time passed. He had another child. 3 years later, he took off that poster and put another one on the wall that said 10 tentative guidelines of parenting. We said, now they had paragraphs. So read this and maybe this will help you. So just how it is in spirituality is the same in parenting. Absolute rules are not good for our progress. They are just not, they don't take into account, as I said, the individuality of a person. And that has to be taken in. When Edison was kicked out of the school and his teacher had called his mother over and said, your son is dumb. She said, you are dumb. My son is not dumb. So every child has certain challenges. Sometimes just because somebody cannot articulate, well, doesn't mean they are not intelligent. Just because a child is not social doesn't mean they have no social skills. It happened, this genius child was always quiet. And it's a true story. I was told this story in a program I was selected in when I was growing up. I think I shared with you, they collected 40 kids from the whole of the state with high IQ and gave them specialized training. So I was one of those kids. And it was an 8-week long psychological program. Now, in that program, we were told this story And there was a kid with very high IQ, but he was mostly quiet. And he just couldn't connect with anybody. So his mother was concerned, and she took him to a therapist and psychologist. So the psychologist said, look, I just have to check your general knowledge at least. What's the capital of India? He said, Jalandhar. And the psychologist said, he's got a lot of work cut out for him. There is not much hope that I see. So he came out, the mother was totally distraught. So she said to him, don't you know the capital of India? How could you say Jalandhar? He said, doesn't he know? He disrespected me by asking such a simple question. He should have asked me a question befitting my intelligence. What is this question? What's the capital of India? I live in India. Of course I know it's Delhi. Delhi has always been the capital of India. So you have to match the level of the person you are dealing with, but not so high. You can't set the bar so high they think it's out of reach and they lose complete motivation. And it can't be so low that there is no challenge in it. It has to be a little carrot dangling in front, and they're moving about, and the carrot always stays ahead. But you do need some low-hanging fruits so they taste success, because nothing motivates like success. The other thing, in fact, it's unrelated somewhat, but I'd like to add, if any young people are listening, you all want to pursue your passion, and all sounds hunky-dory. It sounds pretty good, and there's nothing wrong, but you have to understand there's a difference between the skills the world requires and they're willing to pay you for it, versus the skills you actually have that you think are marketable. So if you're passionate about something, let's say, I don't want to name a field, because if you're in that field, you'll feel good or bad, I don't know, but let's say music. Now, you should by all means go to the end of the world and pursue your passion. As long as you love the idea of music and not necessarily becoming rich from it. Because that cannot be guaranteed. That may or may not happen. It will happen to 0.5% of the musicians. Out of 1,000 very good musicians, only 5 will actually be at a stage where they are making a good living out of it. The rest, 995, would be doing other jobs alongside. But it wouldn't, and it shouldn't matter to you if you're passionate about music. So you have to be reasonable and genuine and authentic with yourself. More importantly, honest with yourself. But if you want a career where you will make a living no matter what, now you may or may not like that career. You may never have a career. You may only have a job. And there's a difference between a career and a job. And I heard this comedian once. He said, those who have a career can't stop talking about it. Those who have a job, their faces will droop the moment you say, what do you do? They're not interested. They're just doing it because it pays their bills. So if you want to have a job regardless, a job that will pay you well, that will help you afford a house somewhere one day, a car, and some savings for your future, for your family, then you've got to be in an industry which the world requires. That's your safest bet. In one of the youth retreats I did many years ago, this kid asked a question. He said, but Bill Gates was a dropout, and Steve Jobs was a dropout, and Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know if he was a dropout, probably he was a dropout, and so on. I said, fair point. But do you think they dropped out and just went on world tour? They dropped out and just put their feet up and relaxed? Do you think they just dropped out and said, we're going to play baseball or cricket all day? Or, during Bill Gates, there wasn't no internet, but do you think they dropped out and spent all their time doing online surfing? Of course not. They dropped out because they had a massive dream to pursue, for which they burned themselves day and night. Bill Gates said in his 20s he never took a day off. When Narayan Murthy made a statement that people should work 70 hours, he faced so much of criticism for it. But I think he had a real point there. You know, all this thing of work-life balance, it is impossible in the beginning of your career if you want a great career. You choose which side your balance is going to tip. You want work or do you want life? Do you want life in your work or do you want work in your life? Once you are at a certain point, then you have more leverage, then you have more power to negotiate and so on. And it's one of the reasons why in my discourses and other things, and earlier when I used to do camps, I always avoided talking about the occult and supernatural and fantastical stuff, because that misguides our youth, and then they are always searching for shortcuts in life. I thought, as Swami, as a sannyasi, as somebody who's committed to truth, I must not do anything. I must use my words mindfully so they're not misguided. Because otherwise they say, this little kid didn't perform too well in one of the exams. His mother asked, well, how come you could not answer the last question? He's only 10 years old or 12. And in fact, 10, yeah. So how come you couldn't answer the last question? And he said, Mujhe yaad nahi raha, I couldn't recall the answer. She said, but you studied it. She said, Mom, you won't believe, I sat there in my examination. I kept doing Om Swami, Om Swami, Om Swami. But still I could not recall the answer. He said, nothing helped at that time. Now, it sounds very cute, and it is cute. But I really hope that you go on to take charge of your life and not rely on anything that is going to weaken you in any way.